Oh, here we are. We are live. Hi, everybody. Joe Rayo and Joe Chaffee here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show on this Wednesday night, the 13th of May, in what
Yeah,
is what was an absolutely gorgeous day, but what is also going to become a rather complex day. What are you doing?
sorry about that, Joe. Once again,
What are you?
YouTube running behind schedule. Well, I think we should be honored. Before leading into Joe and Joe, they always run an ad.
Oh
So,
yeah, well of course.
so there you go.
Let me just let everybody know really quick. My regular website, the meteorologist Joe Chaffee Weather website, has been down, and that's also hooked up to the app. So the app is not working either. And given the world that we live in at the moment, it is very usually when this happens, this stuff gets repaired rather quickly. But I'm guessing that my hosts are having a bit of a problem. The company that hosts my website, so hopefully they'll get this resolved. It came up briefly twice today for about 15 minutes, and I didn't have I didn't up wasn't able to update it, and then it crashed anyway. So hopefully it'll be up soon. In the meantime, there will be a post going up on weatherlongisland.com that will cover everything. And also for Patreon members, there's no issue because all the posts go on there anyway. So if you're a Patreon member, you're getting posts like you always do. So I was saying that looking at everything that's happening today and with what the models are doing and with this subtropical storm that's going to develop and the system that's going to be coming down in the northern stream, the weather is looking to get awfully complicated over the weekend and into next week.
Yes, and there were signals over the last couple of days that we would have a big warm up, which we are going to see on Friday, and that warm up was going to continue right on into next week. But now, as you just mentioned, that subtropical system is going to throw a monkey wrench into the equation and make things a bit more difficult. And indeed, it's going to be problematic in terms of trying to forecast around here. I think from later on in the weekend into at least part of next week. Thanks again to our impending friend out over the Atlantic Ocean.
Well, the the scenario started to show up yesterday with the late afternoon GFS run, and we still have a lot of disagreements in terms of how the overall specifics play out because of how models are handling. You've got this subtropical system that's going to develop, and you've got this northern energy that's coming down, and it might wind up kicking the subtropical system out. That seems to me like that's the most likely scenario, but its presence out there is actually forcing this trough to drop south instead of just moving along. It's
Right.
forcing the trough to dig south and southeastward. So we're likely to see maybe another low getting spawned out of that cold low, a regular old-fashioned low, off the Delaware coast or off the New Jersey coast or off the Virginia coast, and put us in uh, an onshore flow and on and off rain at least for Monday and probably even into Tuesday if that plays out. So it, the subtropical storm system that to me it looks like that gets kicked out. I guess the other
Right.
possibility, Joe, is that, and we'll see how models handle this going forward. There's always the chance that the subtropical system winds up getting absorbed by the upper low, and then you wind up with something that's off the coast that's a little stronger and maybe creates a tighter pressure gradient with some gusty northeast winds, and we'll still wind up with the same outcome on and off rain.
Looking at the map for Tuesday, the famous high pressure cradling the low effect. If you look at the isobars, we've got high pressure that is banked north and east from the lower peninsula of Michigan all the way on up into northern Quebec, the Gaspé Peninsula, and moving on toward Newfoundland. And you have the low, not the subtropical low, but the secondary or the cooler low pressure
Mhm.
system, the extratropical system off of the mid-Atlantic coastline. And the way the isobars are arranged with the high, it looks like it's almost trying to, cradle the low. And when it does this, as you just alluded to, things don't go very fast. That low is not going to be able to move very quickly with the high trying to give it a bear hug, so to speak. And so we may be stuck with an onshore flow and an unsettled weather pattern right on through at least the first part of next week. In fact, maybe even most of next week.
We also have we alluded to this yesterday with this cold front that's going to be coming through Friday evening. The possibility of showers and thunderstorms, and the Storm Prediction Center actually now already has us in a marginal risk of severe weather, and we're going to take a look at that. Probably has a chance that maybe it goes into a slight risk for a small area. We'll see. But first things first is another cold night tonight. We are looking ahead to another round of frosts and freezes, and here's what it looks like, at least on the local map. I'm going to just fix this a little bit here as soon as I find it. What did I do with it? Oh, there
Now,
it is. It's right in
which
front of me.
saint is this now? This is what, Marinus or whatever.
What's that?
I got to tell you, I got to tell you something. This year, for the first time in Lord knows how many years, those three chilly saints have really been doing their thing. We had the first one on Monday, and we had a cold night Monday
Yeah,
night,
Gervais, Memeritus, and I forgot the other one.
whatever. But we had one, we had a cold night Monday night, Tuesday night, and this I think will be with the third and final chilly saints, the last night of chilly, if not downright cold weather, because I think it's going to warm up some in the nights to come.
Well, we've got frost advisories up except around the warmer urban centers, which makes sense. You have a freeze warning up for Ocean County in New Jersey. That's because Tom's River last night, I believe, got down into the upper 20s. The observation in Tom's River actually is comes from, I believe, Miller Air Force Base, and it's in the middle of the Pine Barrens. So you get these really weird lows at night and these highs at night. So they got a little freeze warning there. And then, of course, you've got freeze warnings up for northeastern Pennsylvania, much of upstate New York, and throughout Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and even into Maine. Remember, folks, the growing season is at risk here. And frost advisories up for central, southeast Pennsylvania, and parts of southern New Jersey. But this
The
should
thing I
be
didn't,
this is
the
the
thing I
last
didn't
night of
understand
the cold stuff.
The thing I didn't understand about last night was that much of New Jersey was under a frost advisory. And I said, how is it possible that they're going to get frost? Because that wind was still very active through most of last night. As I said, the cold weather last night was basically in terms of cold air advection. And you would have thought it would be more of a freeze warning as opposed to a frost advisory. Now
Right.
tonight's going to be a perfect night for frost in many places because it's going to be a 3C night, clear, calm, and cold out there. Not much wind at all, and that will again drop temperatures throughout much of suburbia into the 30s, and maybe even in some of those distant outlying rural valley spots briefly touching down into the upper 20s, as was the case this morning, as you mentioned, with Tom's River.
Well, they had a freeze warning up for the eastern half of Suffolk County last night. We had wind all night. I woke up at 5:30 this morning. I looked at the temperature at MacArthur Airport was 39. I don't think
Right.
anybody was anywhere close to 32. So I'm not sure. I guess there was enough. There was enough wind overnight uh, to um, to hold the temperatures up. Also for eastern Long Island. So right now we're looking at some temperatures here at just shortly after 7 o'clock, and we still have some low 60s in parts of northern New Jersey. It's between 50 and 55 on Long Island because we do have a little bit of a sea breeze that worked its way in today, but the winds are mostly light. Few areas gusting here into the upper teens and low 20s, but inland you haven't come off the highs yet. I mean, you've come off the highs, but you haven't really started dropping off. Temperatures are still mostly mid 50s and low 60s, and we'll start to see those numbers drop off as soon as we get to sunset, which will be in the next hour or so. And then after that, we'll watch the temperatures fall off the wall. And again, hopefully, this is the last time we'll have to deal with this with regards to frost and freezes. Although you never know. Even into early June, I've seen the occasional cold night in early June where temperatures in the cold pine barren spots wind up moving down into the 30s. Let's just look over real quick with the watches and warnings that are up right now across the U.S. There's not a whole lot going on, but we do have an enhanced area of severe weather to worry about tonight from Texas northeastward through the southern and central plains. And there's a working severe thunderstorm watch. There might actually be two severe thunderstorm watches. I gotta uh, check see what SPC is doing, but you can see it in the sort of salmonish color. back through western Texas and on up into western Oklahoma, and of course the frost and freezes that you see up in the Northeast. Otherwise, the rest of the country relatively quiet. A few pockets here and there where there's some minor wind issues, but that's just about it. And of course, attention is going to start focusing on the Florida Straits and off the southeast coast of Florida for but when we get to Friday, where the Hurricane Center has a 70% probability of a subtropical depression or a subtropical storm developing.
Yes, and as we noted yesterday, they've now been getting into the habit of not waiting for it to reach tropical storm status before they attach a name to it. Now even a subtropical storm will get a name, and so this particular system. Last year we had Andrea, so I presume this year the first name on the list of candidates will
Arthur,
be Arthur.
Arthur, King of the
Arthur.
Britons, defeater of the Saxons, sovereign of all England. Yes, it's Arthur. And by the way, you could already start to see moisture gathering across the Florida states. It's straits, not states, straits. It's disorganized, and you can tell that by if you look at the loop, which you can see on the screen. That you've got the high level clouds are moving from west to east, the low level clouds are moving from east to west. So it's not quite, there's nothing there yet. But eventually we are going to see lower pressures. Meanwhile, Joe, the Northeast is clear. I mean, it's clear from Maine down to Virginia and west over to Michigan before you start to get into the clouds and with the weather system that is pushing east and the warm front that's going to be setting up toward overhead on Thursday.
Yeah, in fact, it looks like in southeast Pennsylvania and southern sections of New Jersey, Delaware, and portions of Maryland, it was a beautiful day, but they had a lot of probably pop up cumulus developed during the afternoon. But meanwhile, where
You can
we
still
were,
see it there, by the way.
you couldn't buy a cloud out there. This was a gorgeous day out there with blue skies and bright sunshine. Still temperatures below normal. It should be closer to 70 or 71 now, and for the most part, many areas were still in the mid and low 60s. Not a bad day though. Did a lot of yard work this afternoon with Mrs. Rayo, and this was the day to do it, I guess, with all of that dry and clear air overhead.
Well, I walked almost 12 miles today.
Let me ask you a question. Are you ever going to? You do all this walking of 5
You
and
would
10.
think I'd lose some weight, but
Are
go
you ever
on.
going to? Has it ever crossed your mind maybe to get into the November New York Marathon?
No, no,
No. All right.
no. It's not my daughter runs marathons. My son-in-law runs them. I That's their thing. I'm at the point now where if I used to run years ago, and then I noticed that a lot of folks that were a little bit older than me that ran on a regular basis were getting both knees and or both hips replaced or all four. And I thought to myself, you know what? I ain't doing that. So I started drinking and smoking cigars, and I'm a lot better for it. But I do my walking. I'm really, today was so beautiful. I went out early this morning. I walked with my 8 pound weights, one in each
Right.
hand, and I did 5 miles with that. And then I came back and I had some breakfast, which was a fruit smoothie that I make every day. And then I said, you know what? It's so nice out, and there's nothing really going on, and I don't have much to do. I went out again and did another 7 miles, and in fact, I walked with Bill Ubers, one of our regulars. He's on probably, I don't know if he's on the chat board
Yeah.
tonight. I didn't happen to notice. But I got him to walk a couple of miles, so hopefully he's not too sore. So,
You reminded me when you said that you walked with 8 pound weights, and I may have mentioned this on here sometime a long time ago. When my wife and I, when we were first married, we had an apartment in Franklin Square, Long Island. We used to drive to work every morning at like 4 a.m. because we had the early morning shift on radio. And we used to see a guy on Hempstead Turnpike. And if my wife is watching me right now, maybe she can get on the chat board and just say yes or no if she remembers. I'm sure she remembers this. The guy Joe was skinny as a rail. He looked like from the times that we used to pass him at 4 o'clock in the morning on Hempstead Turnpike, he looked like he was about maybe 60, 65 years old. And he was always going like this. He looked like he had a pair of small weights in his hand, and he was always like not running, not even jogging, just walking like this. And I said to myself, you got to be in some kind of shape or some kind of fitness gig to be out and about at 4 or 4:30 in the morning on Hempstead Turnpike with a couple of weights going like going like this.
No traffic at that hour of the morning.
Not much traffic, no, indeed.
Well, it kept him safe anyway. Let's take a look at the radar as of 7:15, and hopefully I won't have the same issue I had last night. No, I did not. Do not have the same issue. Obviously, nothing going on up and down the East Coast, but you can start to pick out coming into view of the Key West radar, seeing some showers beginning to develop there. So that's the seeds of the subtropical system. In West Texas, where we have those severe thunderstorm watches up, you're seeing some showers and thunderstorms starting to flare up there. There's not much else as you go further north. That'll probably come later tonight. We've got some showers up in the northern plains and also back up into parts of Montana and Wyoming. And we're also seeing some rain moving into the northwest and down into northern California, as the weather pattern is favorable for that area to get rain in the next several days. In the meantime, here's what it looks like on SPC's map tonight. I'll just give it a quick refresh. Refresh. Oh, good God. Really? Are we doing this now? Seriously? All right, let's try the other one. All right, let's see if I can get this one to work.
Now, while you're talking about technology or whatever, it's interesting. Um, I'm still on Windows 7, and I obviously on Windows 7 you don't get any updates or anything anymore. And meanwhile, when I came back inside after toiling in the fields earlier this afternoon, and I turned on my computer, I saw that there was like a little exclamation mark indicating that if I shut my computer down, that an update would be put on my computer. What update? I don't get Windows updates anymore with Windows 7. So
Uh-oh.
when it started putting the update, quote unquote, on, what I did was I just simply went over and turned it. It says don't turn your computer off. Well, guess what?
You
I turned
did.
my computer off.
You
So
you showed Bill Gates.
yes.
You did. So there's SPC's map. You can see the two working severe thunderstorm watches there, and the area of risk, enhanced risk in parts of Texas and western Oklahoma. Also, a small area of slight risk up in southern Nebraska, and the marginal risk pushes up into Illinois. Now, for tomorrow, the slight risk is going to shift northeastward from East Kansas across Illinois, Missouri and Illinois, into Indiana, southern Michigan, and northwest Ohio, with marginal risk into western Pennsylvania. Now, on Friday, with a weather front near us, SPC has put a small area of marginal risk southeast and south central Pennsylvania, northeastward through New Jersey, northeastern PA, the Hudson Valley up to about or just north of Albany, western Mass, most of Connecticut, down to western Long Island. So that as I said, we thought yesterday that this would happen, and we also have a little marginal risk area fingering up from Texas on up into Oklahoma, and then turning east into Arkansas and southern Missouri.
And we said yesterday that for Friday that we were thinking that we would likely be in at least a general area of thunderstorms, and we are. But we also alluded to the fact that I think I said that it wouldn't surprise me any if we were in a marginal zone of possible severe weather, and that indeed is the case now. And who knows, maybe tomorrow or on Friday, the folks over at the SPC will upgrade that to maybe a small area of slight for our tri-state region. We'll see it. Certainly, I think, especially with the front coming our way, the cold front later in the day on Friday during maximum heating, the diurnal effect, there could very well be a couple of big poppers out there
Yeah.
later in the day or evening on Friday.
All right, so let's take everybody through here so we can get to the models and then take a look at what this whole tropical thing and how this complex mess that sets up for the weekend and next week. So, starting with tonight, we have a trough that has moved out to the east, and now what's happening is, and it's happening on schedule, is that with that trough moving out, the flow across the U.S. is going to be basically west or even west southwest. we've lost that connection from Canada where it was bringing down the cold air masses. And as we go through the day tomorrow and into Friday, you start to see the next shortwave trough. You see it there, that little 552 bubble that is showing up right here in northern Minnesota. That's an upper air trough that is moving east. It's not the strongest short wave in the world. It'll have a minimal. It's not going to be like some of the other systems that we've been dealing with over the last couple of months that have produced some pretty hefty storms. It's still there though. It's fairly evident and it runs along. So it's going to work with whatever it has when it reaches when the front reaches our area on late on Friday. So until then, we have to undergo the transition, and that's what we start to see for tomorrow, Joe. Our high is off the Carolina coast. We're going to start with a southwest flow tomorrow. We've got this warm front coming up, showers and storms back through the Ohio Valley and lower lakes, where we have the severe weather risk for tomorrow. And then Thursday night, the warm front sets up. Well, let me draw it in. I threw in the chance that there could be a shower or two Thursday night because of where the warm front is. It's virtually on top of us,
Yeah.
and I don't think I don't think it's going to be any big deal. But I wonder whether there might be for somebody that there might be maybe an isolated heavier downpour or even an isolated thunderstorm north of the warm front. It's not. I'm not going to lose sleep forecasting that part of it. But then on Friday, as we go to almost a west wind with the high where it is off the east coast, we send those temperatures up. Mid 70s to low 80s, I think, is a pretty reasonable range. Mid 70s right along the immediate coast, and low 80s in inland areas, especially New York City south and west. And then we bring our front through Friday night with some showers and storms. GFS picks up on this fairly well. The front is through here. And then we go into Saturday, Joe, and this is where now it starts to get a little complicated because the front stalls. You've got the subtropical storm is very evident here on the GFS Saturday morning off the Florida coast. And you're also going to start to see this next weather system that's going to be coming in from the west and head our way across the Great Lakes and then head here for Sunday. So I kind of I'm a little guarded about the weekend to an extent.
Well, I'm concerned on Saturday that I think Saturday is going to be dry, but I don't think it's going to be all that sunny. I think we'll probably see more in the way of cloud cover. I said this yesterday, more clouds than sun, but still a dry day. And then for Sunday, well, it may start out dry, but by the time we get to later in the day on Sunday, as the next cold front approaches, I think we are going to be getting back into a threat of some showery weather here later in the day. So of the 2 weekend days, looks like the better of the two, at least the drier of the two, will be Saturday and Sunday, because the next warm front is going to be to our south
Yeah, I'm
and
going
we
to
get
draw it
the
in.
onshore flow.
I'm going
Yeah,
to draw it in here. This is Sunday afternoon at 2 p.m.
yeah,
The warm front crosses central Indiana and Ohio and goes down into northern Virginia. This is the old cold front from Friday. It stalls out. So yeah, I agree with you. I think Saturday will be the better of the 2 days, but it won't necessarily be anything to write home about. And then Sunday, you're going to have to start dealing with that warm front coming up with the onshore flow. So you're at the very least going to have clouds and maybe some showers. And then here, this low here, you got this low in central Illinois. Here's your subtropical system, which at this point is east of Florida, south of the North Carolina coast. I'm kind of surprised the GFS, and I wonder whether, Joe, this is because of all the upper air energy that's swinging to the east, whether this low, this system, this going to be this subtropical system, is responding to that upper trough, and maybe we're seeing a little bit of what we call baroclinic intensification that's going to be going on with this low as it moves to the northeast.
yeah. I think that certainly would be a good point to bring up, that there could be some enhancement because of the increased baroclinicity, or in other words, the increase in temperature, especially at the higher levels of the atmosphere. And then again, what we're looking at is not necessarily that initial subtropical wave, but the development of another system, kind of an extratropical, a cold core system that may take shape along the mid-Atlantic coast for the beginning of next week.
Right.
And depending upon where that thing is, will determine whether or not we'll have a long string of rather dreary days, or wait, maybe just maybe that high that I just alluded to, the one that's cradling or trying to cradle that high, that storm system, maybe it'll have just enough oomph to push just enough of that storm's influence out to sea, and maybe we might actually have more of a partial sunshiny day here by mid and late week, as opposed to just cloudy and dull, jank, dreary with onshore flow.
Right.
A lot of questions to be answered.
I accidentally lost the map because I wanted to draw in that high that you mentioned. So let me go. Um, let's get to Sunday afternoon. Is was where I left it off. Sunday evening, the low is in northern Indiana. You see where the subtropical low is, and the map doesn't show it, but if you look at where the isobar is, there's a low in central Ohio Monday morning. Here's your subtropical low, and I mean you have a pretty, it's a fairly decent southeast flow coming in from off the ocean into that low in Ohio, and moving along through Monday, that low is now starting to drop southeastward into West Virginia. Here's your subtropical system east of the North Carolina coast. And again, as I said earlier, Joe, we're going to have to see how the models handle this over the next couple of days, whether you wind up absorbing that. On this run, that subtropical low gets kicked out to the northeast. But here's your low by Tuesday. There's a low in central North Carolina, and you have a fairly strong east northeast flow here because you've got
Right.
this high that builds up near Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. I mean, that's just a recipe for it being miserable, at least through Tuesday.
Right. And also we'll be approaching a new moon. I'm not, I don't have the almanac in front of me, but I know right now we're at last quarter, and probably by about the middle of next week, Tuesday or Wednesday, we'll be at new phase, which means that the tides will be astronomically higher than normal, even without a pair of storm systems to deal with. So
I
yeah,
mean,
this could
Joe,
be
if this verifies, look at the fetch Tuesday night.
yeah,
I mean, that's a long fetch that comes out from the Atlantic east of 60 degrees west, and goes straight westward into the New Jersey shore, into the New Jersey coast, the Delaware coast, and on up into Long Island. It'll probably be breezy, and yeah, I think there's probably going to be some tidal concerns here with that 1028 high up to the north. It's going to be very interesting to see how this plays. But the upper air, you look at this, and if you're watching, you're watching from home, and you're saying, well, how does it, why is it looking like that? It just looks so horribly complex. Well, take a look at that. What happened? How the upper air shapes up, because that really is the driver here. Uh, you've got the two players. Okay, so here's your subtropical system off the Carolina coast, and here's your upper low that is sitting near Chicago. This is early Monday morning. The so a couple of things happen here. The other thing that we should mention too, by the way, Joe, is you've got uh, if we widen this out, there's a low that's east of Newfoundland that's just kind of sitting there, almost, I guess, in the standpoint. I bet you if I look at the wide shots, there's probably a 50-50-ish low, and that's forcing all the energy to stay south, and it can't get out of the way because effectively there's something in its way. So when you move along, the upper low near the Great Lakes either kicks out the subtropical low, or it absorbs it. And on the last couple of runs, it kicks it out. But look what happens with that upper low. It actually strengthens and moves southeastward into West Virginia, Virginia, and North Carolina. And here we are Wednesday, Thursday, and you still have the upper low sitting over Virginia and North Carolina on Thursday. It just, this particular model run seems to want to trap it there, and that does not bode well for improving weather conditions after we get through the initial round of whatever happens Monday and Tuesday.
true, true. But maybe by Wednesday or Thursday, this entire bit of nonsense will be just far enough offshore if the high is strong enough to suppress it, and that may also help to diminish somewhat the onshore flow that could be rather robust and vigorous for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week, especially so again with that new moon coming our way about the middle of next week.
And what's really odd too is the fact that back just not that many days ago, most of the long range models were taking this way out and building a big ridge in the east and bringing in some very warm weather for the middle and latter part of next week. We may have to wait for that to happen. Here's the here's a wider view of all of this. I want to show everybody the upper air on the wider view, and let's just back up a bit. Well, it's not really quite a 50-50-ish low, but there actually is a low on Friday sitting at just east of Newfoundland around 50 and 50. And it just sort of takes its time moving out. But all the energy, and there is a little bit of blockiness up near Greenland, so all the energy has to get forced somehow to the southeast. The European, remember, let's bear in mind that just because the GFS has this doesn't necessarily mean it's correct. The European does have a similar idea. Uh, the only difference is that the European has a weaker subtropical system, and it gets, basically it does get absorbed, but it's very weak. But it does still have a stronger upper trough, which on Tuesday is sitting on the PA Ohio border. And then on Wednesday, Joe, the upper low on the European is over the Delmarva Peninsula and still sitting in southeast Virginia on Thursday and sitting over Chesapeake Bay on Friday before it finally gets kicked out to the northeast. So even the European would imply that there might be, after Monday and Tuesday, there's a lot of uncertainty regarding the weather for the latter part of next week. Unless we can get this whole thing to get kicked away, we may wind up having to deal with clouds and showers maybe for Wednesday and Thursday. I don't want to go out that far yet. I
Uh,
still want to see how this evolves.
but it's so funny, Joe, is that I know you were looking at this pattern, not this particular pattern, but some about a week ago. You were talking about how the ridge may build in, and maybe if it builds in just enough, we could finally get a series of warm and dry, pleasantly warm days here, and that certainly would be the case if we didn't have the sudden development of a subtropical low, and if the subtropical low didn't suddenly slow the upper level winds to a degree that if another system coming in from the Ohio Valley started to come in and looks like it was going to try to stretch or interconnect with that offshore system. And if all of these things, see, you're not supposed, this is why you should never, ever try to make a forecast much beyond 5 or 6 days because there are stumbling blocks or it's like a minefield
Well,
sometimes.
especially in the spring.
And yeah, and all of a sudden now would look to be a really nice. And I noticed that the CPC, the Climate Prediction Center, yesterday they had the whole central and eastern United States under a probability of above normal temperatures. Now they're backing off a little bit. Now for at least the eastern the Atlantic seaboard, we're back to near normal. We're not in that above normal, near normal, kind of
Right.
reflecting the onshore winds and the
Well,
potential of
that's
that.
because the upper ridge, on the way everything is playing out now, the upper ridge, instead of being along the East Coast, is going to be uh, more along about, say, 90 west,
Right.
running up the Mississippi River over to the Great Lakes. So we still have troughing off the East Coast. It's probably going to keep things cool. WPC, by the way, does produce uh, patches of heavy rains over the next 7 days, running in an arc from Texas northward to Missouri and then crossing eastward through the lower lakes and then through New England. We're on the southern edge of an inch and a half to 3 inches of rain that are being indicated we're on the southern edge of that line. The northern edge goes all the way up to the Canadian border. And you can also see the heavy rains, actually, some heavy rains touching southeast Florida. And it's a bit dry down in southeast Florida, so the rain will be welcome there. The heavier rains are just offshore. By the way, there's still always the chance that we still don't know exactly where this surface low is going to pop up. So there's always a chance that one of the runs, a couple of runs back, had the low, had this subtropical system straddling the Florida coast, the southeast Florida coastline in its development phase. Now that might be a little far fetched. We'll see, but I wouldn't necessarily rule out uh, the low maybe forming a little bit to the left. Again, for us, it's going to be how it reacts with that upper low and how it really complicates it really complicates our weather here indirectly because of the fact that it's out there. It keeps this system from just playing through and moving along. And yesterday, the Hurricane Center updated their forecast. They were supposed to do it at 9 o'clock. They updated it right after we went on the air, which keeps my record intact of saying something, only having them to change it. But they updated it now. They must have just for us, Joe. They did it for us. Okay. So now let's see. Now they're basically saying the same thing. Environmental conditions conducive for gradual development of the system, and a subtropical depression or storm is likely to form this weekend. The system is also expected to move generally northeast over the western Atlantic through early next week. The next special tropical weather outlook on this system will be issued at 9 a.m. on Thursday or sooner if necessary. So now we have a 10% chance of it developing in the next 48 hours and a 70% chance of it developing over the next 5 days. And they're acknowledging that moisture that's down there already because they put the X there
Right.
on the map. One other thing I want to show everybody here. Let me just go back to. I want to go back to the GFS. I always like to look at the wind shear issue, because that's usually that's always very important in a situation like this. But it is a bit of a hybrid system, so it's not quite as important as it would be, say, if you were looking at something that was purely tropical. But if you look here on the wind shear, and what this map is showing is basically wind shear is wind increasing with height. When you have strong wind shear, that prevents tropical storms from developing, true tropical storms. When hurricanes get involved in a strong wind shear environment, they tend to weaken as the thunderstorms get ripped apart. But you'll notice that starting on Friday and Friday night, you have this very, very small area here off the Florida coast where the upper winds do drop off to an extent. So it does between that, and again, I think because of the fact that you have this deep upper trough that's swinging into the Great Lakes over the weekend, that you're seeing what you and I mentioned before about baroclinic intensification, or intensification the way non-tropical systems strengthen. I think that's what you're seeing here. And when you get into the heart of tropical season, you start to see larger and larger areas of very light winds aloft. Particularly if we're going to wind up seeing an active year, you're going to see less in the way of westerly winds in the upper atmosphere, which would be more favorable for tropical storm development. So we're back full screen now. By the way, I should also mention this note. Tropical storms, if you look statistically at seasons, there's no real correlation between getting a tropical storm in the month of May or in the early part of the tropical season does not necessarily correlate to an active season.
No,
We've had early storms in subnormal seasons. It's kind of like in the wintertime. Just because you get a snowstorm in November doesn't mean you're going to get them, in December, January, and February. God knows this winter proved that right, and it also proved last winter right.
this was
So
the winter. This was the winter of La Nada, which meant that we were going to have a normal winter.
right,
Two.
and what happened? You had a stratosphere that set up the way it does for an El Nino or a strong El Nino or a strong La Nina.
Right.
So go figure.
So what do we have going for? Well, we've already said. I've said this more than once that in winters, at least here in the immediate tri-state area, where we've had a paucity of snowfall, and we certainly had a paucity this year at Central Park, less than 5 inches, and that doesn't happen too often. But in the 4 or 5 times that has happened, the very next winter, the snow came back in like gangbusters. So maybe next winter we will make up for what we lost this winter season, and maybe we'll have a more. I certainly can't follow the same script twice, 2 years in a row. Could it? We'll see.
Johnny Quest would like you to comment, please, about Comet Swan.
Comet Swan is dying. I,
Okay.
I, this was a comet. There was actually two of them. There was Comet Atlas, which everybody made a big deal about, and that comet kind of broke up into a bunch of pieces before it ever had a chance to get near to the sun. And Comet Swan, up for the last 2 weeks, they've been saying this could be the comet of the decade. This could be the brightest comet in many years. This could be, and I wrote an article for Space.com, which has been online since late yesterday or last night, saying, folks, I hate to tell you this comet ain't going nowhere. This isn't even going to be the comet of the week. The comet looked like it was brightening, and all of a sudden it stopped, and now it's going down in terms of brightness, and it's a relatively dim little wispy thing, and don't even now. If you want to see something really nice in the nighttime sky, actually the dawn sky, and Joe, you were nice enough to post it on some of your platforms as well. Tomorrow morning at 4:56 a.m. 4:56 a.m. For those of you who don't have anything better to do, if you go outside at that particular moment in the morning, the dawn will be well advanced. Not too many stars will be visible at that hour. Sun's coming up earlier and earlier now. The International Space Station is going to pass directly over the tri-state metropolitan area at 4:56. If you look toward the northwest, you'll see it. It'll look like a very bright star. If you've seen Venus in our evening sky, this is going to get about as bright as that. No problem. You won't need telescopes or binoculars to see it. You'll see it. It'll start moving up the northwestern sky. At 4:58, it's going to be right smack over your head. And then it will continue moving on a trek down toward the southeast, and it will disappear beyond the southeast horizon at 5:03. Since this is an unusually high overhead pass, you'll be able to keep this space station in view for almost 7 minutes. It's traveling at 18,000 miles an hour, Joe, almost as fast as you go on the LIE sometimes, I
Oh
know.
yeah. In my 2003 Toyota with 300,000 miles on it.
Right.
That
Well, not
that
quite
that
three,
I'm
not quite
trying to
three.
get the last 300 miles to get to 300,000, and it's rattling like crazy. And I don't want to put another dime into it. I just did an oil change. I just
Right.
want to get it to 300,000.
Right.
The front end is beginning to is like ready to fall off. Knock on wood. I just like I said, I just need 300 miles. Um, uh, by the way, I said earlier Miller Air Force Base in it's Miller Air Park near Tom's River, so I stand
Right.
corrected. And
You
that's
want to
in
know what that reminds me of? That airport. I did see it a couple of times when I visited WOBM down in Tom's River. I don't know if you remember this, Joe, but back in the '60s, they're actually off of the Whitestone Expressway. There was an airport, Flushing Airport. Do you remember that?
yeah, yeah,
They used to park the blimps there in
yes.
the '60s, and that's kind of like the field in Tom's River. I mean, it's not LaGuardia Airport. It's not even Westchester County Airport.
Well, that's not
It's
too far
just,
from Lakehurst,
yeah,
where the was it the Hindenburg went down.
right, exactly,
The
exactly.
biggest tragedy in the world of all of humanity. Oh, and the
Oh, humanity.
yes. All right, so let's do.
And he yells, and he actually, at the minute it explodes, the announcer starts screaming, "Get out of the way, Charlie! Get it out of the way!"
Oh God. Oh, good Lord. All right, so let's do a little Briller Jeopardy here. He has two questions on Death Valley.
Death Valley, California, not Death
Yes.
Valley Days, the TV show.
No. Death
And by the
Valley.
way, Joe, tomorrow morning, another big morning for you on Perry Mason,
Which is?
the last Perry Mason.
Oh, the case of the final fade out.
Right, Fade to Black.
Oh, good. So now that they can go, I'm not crazy about the last season episodes. Some of them are good, others are not. I think they were starting to get stretched for scripts, but I also don't like the fact that they played the sort of Mod Squad music in the background. You know, the sort of canned rock and roll
Right,
music. It's
right.
like get me back to so that means on Friday we go back to season one,
That's
episode
correct.
one, season one. I can't.
That's
So
correct.
that's I
Back,
think
back to the beat.
it's
Back to the back to the Beadzo Bleach ads
right. I think
at the end of the
episode
show.
one in the case of the something redhead and I don't know if I think it was episode one that starred Whitney Blake.
Oh, Whitney Blake was a very attractive woman. She was
Yes,
she was on she was Mrs. Baxter on
on
Hazel, right?
Hazel. She also produced the long running series One Day at a Time.
Uh huh.
I
And
think she was a
she was the mother
creator
of
and producer.
and she was mother of Meredith Baxter, or Meredith Baxter Burney,
Yes,
depending
correct.
on.
Yes, yes. All right, so Death Valley, the place. In 1913, Death Valley set its all time high and low temperature record in the same year. Do you know what the all time high and the all time low are?
I know what the all-time high for the planet Earth is. It's what, 134.
Well, that's
Death
it.
Valley's not Death
Well,
Valley is not too far behind. I think they
no,
were like what?
134 for Death Valley.
It was 134 for Death Valley.
Yes, and the all time low.
I'm thinking of what is the all-time high then for the planet Earth? I thought it was someplace in like the Sahara or whatever.
Well,
Is it higher
maybe
than
it's
that?
also 134.
I don't know. The all-time low for Death Valley. I would presume it gets awfully cool at night and in the wintertime.
Talk about
Uh,
radiational cooling.
yeah, yeah. I would say 45.
15.
15
Yeah,
in
15.
Death Valley.
Hmm.
Oh,
Now, in 2001, Death Valley set the record for the most consecutive days over 100 degrees. How many?
oh dear. How about 100? How about I'll pick a number out of mid space. 113.
Not too shabby, but it's more than 20% off. 154.
154.
154. 154 days in a row of over
You're not
100.
going to see too many real estate agencies running to build.
Yeah, I'm thinking not. I'm thinking not.
And incidentally,
Um,
Tim Veltman mentioned a while ago. I just backed up on the chat board here. Local meteorologist here, Tim Drawbridge. And I know I've never met Tim Drawbridge, but Tim Drawbridge was a very good friend of somebody that you and I worked with at FiOS One,
oh.
Courtney.
Oh,
Courtney
really?
Courtney Kane, I think, went to the same school with Tim Drawbridge. What a great name, Tim Drawbridge. Does that mean when
That is a cool name.
that I mean when he issues an alert for something, does that mean he signals the alarm bell and brings the gates down because the drawbridge is about to go up?
Oh God. Charlie Baker's
Anyway, sorry
Char
about that, Tim.
that's
If you're watching, all in good fun. Yeah.
yes, he
Uh,
knows. He knows.
he
Uh,
Tim Drawbridge expects that on Friday now that the area of unsettled weather or severe weather is going to be expanded and upgraded for Friday to include damaging winds, some hail, and even a tornado or two up in the Albany area. And I wouldn't argue with
yeah,
that.
I think they're going to wind up expanding that.
Yeah,
Um, I apparently now I'm getting Quincy McCoy says the weather is pleasant in eastern North Carolina, so he needs to go to his park nearby and walk. Bill Uber is on, and he says he's having a hard. He's on tonight, but he's having a hard time staying awake. I guess those couple of miles took it out of him. And Charlie Baker says when you walk and the pounds don't disappear, the condition is called relaxed muscle.
relax.
I won't argue with that. That actually that sounds good. I'll go with that.
Okay.
Um, Anthony Orr, I got your message yesterday. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to respond because I was dealing with all these horrible technical issues today. But I will answer you. But I did read it, and I'm Anthony always keeps me honest to make sure I'm on top of all the tropical developments, and he knows I appreciate it greatly. Jimmy 132 says he's going to the hospital for X-rays on his neck and spine, having neck issues when I turn my neck just to the right when it makes my face. Oh my God! Yeah, I think you might want to have that checked out, um, Jimmy. Hope everything turns out okay for you. This is a tough time having if you have to something happens to you and you have to go to a hospital. It's with everything else that's going on. So by all means, stay safe and get yourself checked out if you can. Uh, sounds like it's something you have to deal with here. Ryan Ford, could this severe weather event for Friday be an instance where the Cape values get up into the high range? I don't know, Ryan, as far as the Cape values are concerned. I honestly tell you the truth, I really don't look at the Cape very much. Um, I just find sometimes it sends me, I've seen it sometimes where you get these off the wall Cape numbers and nothing happens, and there are other times when the Cape is not all that impressive and you still wind up with some big storms. Oh, Timothy Veltman wants me to look at Typhoon. Oh, I forgot this. We have Typhoon Vong
Typhoon Bong
Fong.
Fong. Vong
Vong
Fong.
Fong.
That sounds
Uh,
like that sounds like a Japanese science fiction movie.
no,
I
but
mean,
it
like
is there.
after
And by
after
the way,
Godzilla and Mothra, we have Vong Fong.
by the way, folks, if you don't know, one of the wonderful things about Tropical Tidbits, Levi Cowan's great website that we use, and we're very thankful that he lets us use it for as much as we do. He's got this one. If you go where it says current storms, he's got all the storms that are going on around the world, all on one page. So when we get deeper into the hurricane season, it's kind of like your one-stop shopping place. Okay, where you can look at these storms. Here is Vong Fong. Okay, here's a satellite imagery. Oh no, I don't have my flash player turned on, so I can't. So much for that. But you can see the satellite here, the satellite still shot, and uh, the, uh, uh, the system is close to the Philippines, and making that right turn. Here's the GFS ensemble with this as it turns northward, then turns northeastward and passes south of Japan. I just want to see. He's usually got the advisory up here somewhere. Let's see. Oh, you always have to make it. So here we go. So maximum sustained winds of of Typhoon Vongfang, warning number 9. It is at 12.1 north, 127.0 east, moving 265 at 9. Top winds 105, gusting to 130. It's supposed to peak at a 115 and then gradually weaken as it turns northeastward. It's supposed to pass. You can see how it's got it plotted here on the map. Let me make sure you guys can see it. No, you can't because I don't have the map up. Now I do. Hang on. So there's the map, and it literally straddles the eastern part of the Philippines, doesn't go over Manila, and then moves out offshore, and then turns northeastward, passing east of the island of. Now I'm going to really get brave here. You ready?
Okay.
Okay. Um, Ishigakijima, the island of Mayakolima, and then it passes east of Kadena and east of Amani Oshima. I don't think I did that half bad. I hope I
No, that's
pronounced
very
them
good.
right.
Now, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Since you're showing this particular path of this particular tropical cyclone, would you call this the Manila envelope of uncertainty?
Oh, you're so bad. Go away. Go away. Here's what it
I
looks
had
like.
to.
Yeah, apparently you did.
Yeah.
Uh, let's see if I can get the image. Yeah, here's it's actually not a half bad looking storm in terms of its structure on the satellite. It's got that sort of classic look to it that it's going to a Category 3, but that's as strong as it's going to get. Once it gets north, we're very early in the season, even out in the Pacific. And once it gets north of 15 degrees north, you're going to start to see this thing, weaken. And of course, it's also interacting with the mountains in the Philippines, which tend to be pretty high. So that does have an impact on the circulation. But at least with respect to the tropics, we're getting some early practice here for when the season really starts to rev up.
Well, I know who it's an international consortium that comes up with the names for the Atlantic Basin and even for the for the Eastern Pacific. I'd like to know who picks these names for the Western Pacific.
Well,
Uh,
they used to just use standard. All the countries participate, so every country, I guess, it's a point of, you know.
Obviously, it's not in alphabetical order because Von Fong is way down there at the bottom of the alphabetical list.
Well, they don't start. Yeah, they have so many out there. They just start at A, go to the end, and then they go back to A, and then they just keep, it just keeps going around and around and around.
It seems like what they do is they have the names run their course, and then when they start the next season, they just pick up where they left
Yeah,
off.
that's exactly what they do because
Yeah.
they it's not unusual for them to have in the West Pacific on some years, particularly in strong El Nino years, where you wind up with tropical systems out there in January, February, and March.
Right.
and even in non-El Nino years. So I honestly, I mean, I don't really pay too much attention to what goes on in the Eastern Pacific. I'm sorry, in the Western Pacific. Although you do have, of course, when you get those typhoons and those super typhoons, they're in the news, so we were able to take a look at them. But as far as how, the day-to-day meteorology, it's not something that I really pay close attention to.
Well, anyway, I think we've just about run our course tonight, haven't we?
Yes, we did. We made it for a whole hour,
That's
and we
right.
had stuff to talk about. It's funny.
Yeah.
We started the week. We didn't have really a whole lot to talk about. Now here we are on Wednesday, and we have a ton of crap to talk about.
I'll bet you we'll have even more to talk about tomorrow, and especially so, who knows? We might even be in the middle of a big storm on Friday with thunder and lightning and all sorts
Yeah.
of stuff.
I mean, we might have, we might hear a very loud kaboom.
Yes.
Where's the kaboom? They're supposed
Or
to with the immunium throw. What is it? The immunium space modulator?
I don't know.
From
Uranium
Martin the Martian.
P-238, right?
What's that?
The uranium
The right,
P-238.
that's it. The uranium 3 P238 space modulator.
Yes.
Someone has taken the space modulator.
Or if not, somebody, a big horse face guy with a guitar will slam it over your head or my head and go, "Kabong!"
Kabong. Yes. All right. So I think this is another night for the Fife is Right on Mayberry Week on MeTV. And yes, I will make sure. I DVR at Perry May. I still haven't watched last night's and today's episode, so that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to
I
go
don't know.
upstairs and
I,
watch
I
those
forgot
two
to watch.
episodes.
They had Prices Right with RuPaul the other night. Did
Oh
you?
yes, yes. And he spun the wheel and he got $1, I think, and won $10,000.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, congratulations to RuPaul.
Yes.
Oh,
Okay, so we'll leave it at that. We'll see you tomorrow. All right. So I said this at the beginning. My app isn't working right now because my website is down. And as soon as the website comes up, the app will work again. So in the meantime, I'll be putting up posts on my weatherlongisland.com website until my meteorologistjoechaffee.com website comes back on. And of course, for Patreon members, everything is working fine. Uh, Stuff is going on there. I'm putting something up in a couple of minutes as soon as we say goodnight. So good night, Mr. Rayo. We'll see you tomorrow.